Going on? What's going on? I already know what it is. See him do-rag saying right now. But we are back with Train of Thought after a nice little hiatus. So I am doing a double header episode, meaning today you guys are going to get episode 9 and 10. So that's why I just called it double header. You know, kind of like the NBA when they had the two games in one segment. You know, this kind of what we're doing with this. So I hope you guys are ready. It's a lot of information that I plan to give during this broadcast. And it will be up on both episodes will be up on YouTube today. So when this is over, those will be uploaded, and you'll be able to watch them on the YouTube. And I also will have them highlighted on here as well. But also just a friendly reminder of today, I will be playing in the Landlords Invitational after the podcast are over with. And that'll be on the Landlords GC Twitch channel. So if you want to see me play, because this will probably be my last Tekken tournament for a little bit. You know, I just need a break from online generally. Debating if I'm gonna still stream some Tekken, because you know I got other games I like to play and stuff too. But as far as the competitive side of things, like I don't know, because it's like I'm a little conflicted, because it's like a part of me doesn't want to completely stop, but on the other hand, I still want to make like some content, you know. And I know Tekken is like the number one thing watched here, so I kind of don't want to kill the number one thing. So I don't know, I may just for the time being like probably just do maybe still some random gameplay, but do more educated stuff like lab streams and stuff like that. I don't know, I'm still like working it out in my head, but I know competitively I need to like reboot, refresh, all that. Like that just has to happen, because online is killing me. But I need to offline bad. Yo, Charles, what's up, Charles? What's going on, man? But yeah, but anyway, outside of that though, the first episode we'll be talking about is episode 9. I'm well aware of this, and you know I like to have quirks in my titles or whatever, playing off of stuff, puns, you know, the whole nine, all that fun stuff. But we'll be talking about awareness. I think this is a topic that's like very neglected when it comes to fighting games. Like people don't, it's not at the top of the list when people think of something that they need to hone or improve as a skill. So I'm hoping that after this episode, people take awareness a little bit more seriously, because it's definitely important. To me, it's one of the most important, but also one of the most overlooked at the same time. So you're probably wondering, like, well, what is awareness? Well, awareness is being able to spot every necessary detail during said match and being ready to respond with either action or reaction. In other words, like probably, I'll put it this way, probably most of the time when somebody starts a match, they probably, of course, doing some of the things necessary, like what strategy am I gonna run, you know, what flow chart could I go with, this, that, and the third. That's also good, but when you're doing those things, you have to pay attention to everything that's going on during the match. So while you're trying to execute, you know, that flow chart, or while you're trying to execute this, be sure to pay attention to everything. That's a huge factor, because when you don't pay attention, you could fall victim to a lot of things, and you could even lose due to not paying attention. Like, people don't know how expensive it can be to not pay attention, if you catch my drift. But I've seen so many players like lose matches and lose in situations where if they simply just watched what was going on, it would have, you know, they possibly could have got the W. And them be the heartbreakers too. Like, those really be the, like, you sit there and them be the hardest ones to rewatch. Like, you be like, man, and then you like, you ever heard somebody say, oh man, I didn't know there was that much time left, or I didn't know that he had that much life, or I didn't know he had that much bar, or I didn't know. And you know, when you hear that, like, so what you honestly have to deduce when you rewatching and analyzing the playback is, oh man, I wasn't paying attention to said person's resource or whatever. So just to further touch on, I'm going to go over some things that could possibly help you, or keys that you need to watch and pay a whole lot of attention to. And that is key things to be aware of. First off, life bar. Life bar is like, life bar is really a factor, because, you know, that's pretty much equivalent to putting up points on the board in a sporting game. Yo, Simmons, what's going on? Thanks for tuning in. But yeah, it's like putting up, you know, points on the scoreboard. That's how you score. You know, you hit the opponent to score, and you block to stop your opponent from scoring. So that's pretty much like super important. That's one reason why I kind of labeled it first, even though that's not the only way you could necessarily lose, because you can lose time, but even then, you know, life is still a factor, because your life has to be at a certain amount when the time runs out. So that's why life bar is at the very top. It's life. And also, let me see, if I had to put another example, like a sports example, like case in point, football. Football is very good. You could use any sport, but football is very good simply because if I had to say neutral, it would be the pre-snap. The pre-snap would be the neutral. And when it's pre-snap, that's when, you know, you're making sure all your players are in position, all your pieces are in line, everything is just, you know, you got everything together. Like, okay, my receiver is over here, my running back is right here, my O-line is good to go. Like, all of that is really being arranged before, and this is before the ball is even snapped. this is well before that. So you got all that arranged, and now you're looking to proceed. So you snap, and now this is when everything, you know, goes into motion. And in order to, one side is trying to score, one side is trying to defend at the point. And then it's up to you, by the time the game is over, obviously, that you have more points than the opponent. Meaning you attack that life bar better. you attacked and you met the overall goal. If I had to put a sports analogy behind that. And that's the first one. And then of course, with the mention of it is time. Time is very important. Every match is within said time limit, whether it's 60 seconds, 99, or whatever the time constraint is. You have to pay attention and be aware of that, because if you don't, as I mentioned, you're going to lose track of time. What happens when we lose track of time during our day? You know, we either, oh man, it's almost this time, or like you're at work and you're like, oh man, I still got to do this, but this much time has passed. I spent too much time here, or I spent too much time worried about this or doing this, and it can get crazy. Well, that's the same thing in fighting games. If you lose track of time, you may play a bit too passive and thinking, oh, okay, I can do this, but you're not looking at the time and you're not maintaining your view on the life bar. And when you don't do those things, like I said, they can be detrimental to you even getting a victory. And that's what you don't want. Like, the overall goal is to win. So that's why awareness is important, and you got to make sure that, you know, with you playing, that you're paying attention to this. Because losing track of time, you'll miss out on being able to possibly execute the one strategy you wanted to do, or you lose out on being able to, you know, take full advantage of said situation, this, that, and the third. Time is a weapon. And, you know, people will get mad at people that try to time somebody out, but that's actually a viable strategy. And if you don't know how to stop it, that's just another thing you're going to have to learn to overcome during the battle. If you're fighting a person who's good at managing the time, that's, like I said, that's just another thing you have to deal with. So you have to play in a way where you mess up their time management. Like, you may have somebody that likes to play lame and defensive, and they use the clock a lot to try to burn down time and take away your opportunity through using the time. This is one of the oldest strategies in the book. What's up, Reed? Morning to you. What's up, man? What's up, bro? But yeah, that's a real strategy. Burning time off, because as I mentioned earlier, there is a time constraint and you have to meet the goal under said time. So that's added pressure. And if you can't play under that condition or deal with that, like I said, you're going to have a long match. You're going to have a long process to deal with. And against turtles, like especially turtles, if I had to bring up a player type that's really good at, you know, utilizing time and trying to take time away from you, is turtles. Turtles would definitely look to just take full advantage of time, because they don't really want to play offense. They want to use their defense as their offense, meaning putting points up on the board by punishing, because defense, it can become a powerful offense if played correctly. It can. Like I said, as I mentioned in football, if you playing good defense, you can make a lot of things happen. Like you cause the team to fumble, you sack the quarterback and make them lose yards, get an interception, and now you're on all these things can convert to offense. That's why the saying defense wins championships is a very real thing. But you also still have to put some points up on the board too, which is why that turtle, as I mentioned, if you can get them to come out of their shell and make them make mistakes, that's you turning the tide in your favor. So, because I notice a lot of people do not know how to deal with what they like to call time scammers. And turtles are time scammers, particularly. And in order to time scam, you kind of have to do it back. But it has to be a combination of, as I mentioned, that life bar. If you get that life lead, you definitely have the ability to scam the time back. And that's really effective against people who like to just rely on using time solely. And that's the tidbit on time. So always be aware of how much is left on the clock, because that's going to possibly make or break the match. I definitely recommend that in practice mode. I know you can't necessarily have the clock running, which I think more fighting games need to incorporate that, where you can actually simulate time moving during practice mode, because with that, I think that'll help more players be aware of that factor, because it could be a very strong one if used right. So for the next generation of fighting games, can we please add that in practice mode? Because to me, when you can fully simulate, in order for practice mode to really be fully effective, you have to be able to simulate everything. Now, I know, of course, with the next bullet point that's coming up that we're about to elaborate on, you can do that, but I don't remember time. I think time is usually infinite. I don't know, because I never really, like I said, I never really remembered being able to tinker with time. That's my whole thing. So that needs to be a regular thing. Because with practice mode, the more you can simulate real time, the better, the more comfortable I think players would be playing like real matches. But you have to be able to simulate everything. If you can only simulate some of it, it's like, okay, I got this, but then you encounter that one thing you couldn't necessarily train yourself for, and then you fall victim to it. So I think that's important. So hopefully, practice modes, as people, with more players start playing fighting games and stuff like that, that we make a practice scenario that can fully benefit, like fully. And the next bullet point, though, as I mentioned that we're about to go over, is meter and resource management. Now, this is mainly a 2D property. I see it the most in 2D, but it can exist in 3D as well, obviously. I mean, look at the 2D characters in Tekken, and then there are 3D games with bar. But this is important because just like life bars, those bars have to be watched and maintained. Whether it's yours or your opponent's. Let's see. Case in point, if you got a full bar in Street Fighter V, let's just throw out a random example, and you're fighting, let's see, we'll use Nash. Yeah, we'll use Nash since that's the character that, I played when I was playing. But you have full bar and you do this, and then they're trying to projectile or possibly jump in on you. Now his super has the ability to go through projectiles and anti-air. So once you get like full bar, it's pretty dangerous to do those things, because if the person you're playing has the reactions, then as soon as you do it, you about to take some damage. And no different in Tekken either. Once you get your rage, you have access to rage art, and as everybody knows me for, the rage art god, as they call me. If a person sticks out or does something that's, unsafe, and you react with the rage art, and they get whacked for it. I mean, that's not necessarily your traditional meter, but it's a mechanic that allows you to garner some type of advantage, and it's important to pay attention to that. Like in Tekken 7 is a little different. Like, we have resources, but it's not really in the form of like traditional meter. You have rage, and then you have armor moves. So, and you have to pay attention. If I had to bring up armor moves, you have to pay attention to how the opponent is using them. Case in point, like a lot of Asuka players, they may back 3, and if you don't punish it, then they'll do, what's that? Is it 1+2? Her armor move, and it's a wall bounce. It has a built-in wall bounce property as well. So that's why it's important to try to punish that back 3 if you can, or if you can't punish it, if you're a character that can't punish it, space yourself to not get hit by a follow-up, meaning back away, because she is very negative when she does that. But the positional advantage that she could have to avoid punishment is what makes that move difficult to deal with if you're trying to get a punish. But it's definitely best to, if you can't punish it, to just space yourself to try to kind of give yourself positional advantage, meaning taking her space away where she can't immediately follow up, if they're the type of player that won't just chuck something out after that. But if you're fighting a player that just will chuck something out after that, then you definitely want to look to space and let them hang themselves, because that's a harebrained move to deal with. Just to give you a little insight on dealing with back 3. But in your traditional meter games such as your Dragon Ball Fighters, Grand Blue, Guilty Gear, pretty much your traditional 2D situations, you have bar that you gotta watch, and usually that bar is used to either do a super, enhance special moves, etc., etc. And with that, properties of special moves changes, meaning if you do the meter burn version, you may be plus, or it might be an extra hit involved, or just things change. So that's another reason why you should pay attention to meter and resources, because in a situation where you normally might have had the advantage, you might not have the advantage just because your opponent is using that meter and trying to create the advantage for themselves. So that's high key important. I think it's so, most people when they play fighting games, they so intent. I could tell you this 100% right now. If you do a poll and asks every player what do they like to do when they play, they're gonna say hit buttons. I just want to scrap. I want to slobber knocker. I want to, brawl. And I can guarantee you, out of 10 people, 8 out of 10 to 9 out of 10 will say that. You're really going to have, I'm going to play defense and I'm going to do this. I'm going to space. I'm going to do, I could guarantee you that. So because of that, since most people think like that, they're not really paying attention to if they can be countered. And that's what could make the brawler style kind of treacherous. Because, yeah, you can get in and you can cause turmoil, but at the same time, you can mess yourself up and possibly make yourself open and all types of stuff like that. Like in boxing, typical strat, brawler wants to get in and bang, and the person with reach wants to play the distance game. So in Tekken, if I had to choose, if I had to simulate a boxing match with a perfect analogy of that, Steve versus Jack. That's perfect. Jack wants to play long range. Jack does not want any parts of close range for real. And Steve, he's a boxer. He wants to be all in your grill. So that's where he's going to be the most effective at. But not to fully divert away from what we're on, but meter and resource management. So case in point, if your person has meter, and let's say the average thing people know about DPs or Dragon Punch, it's birthed from Street Fighter, but it's pretty much a typical motion, forward, down, forward, and then the punch button. Because Grand Blue has DPs, Guilty Gear has DPs. I'm sure Unio or Uniclear or whatever acronym that game is going by right now has DPs. So it's become a universal thing. So people just say DP. If anybody is wondering what that is, that's what that is. So you have that motion. You usually have a meter burn meter burn one. And meter burn ones are typically nowadays invincible. In the older games, DPs were just outright invincible. So you would use them as kind of like a get off the option. That's nowadays that's the way the EX1 is used as. But case in point, you trying to rush down and then you don't pay attention to your opponent has that meter, and then you eat an uppercut to the chin simply because you weren't paying attention to their meter. And the vice versa could happen. If they're a bit overzealous and you got meter, you can do the same thing if your character has that option. And that's important. That's why I say it's important to always pay attention to that, because eating one of those in certain situations can lead to you dying, possibly you losing the momentum in the match. Just all of these things can happen, and that's why I stress that you pay attention to this, because, and that's even for yourself definitely, because when you get barred, like I said, you have access to those enhanced moves, or if you got a full bar, you can do your super, and you have to use these resources. You have to manage them and you have to use them well. That's the only way you're going to get the most out of them. And that's my full take on that. I know most people that, again, like I said, when they play, they don't really fully pay attention to this or utilize it to its max potential. Next up, strategy / tendencies. This is dang near almost in the same realm as meter resources management, but this is more so checking for sequences, certain buttons. Let's see what else. Flow charts, all that falls into strategy and tendencies. If I had to use an example, say you fighting a person that loves to, we'll go to Tekken real quick. Say you fighting a Hwoarang player that loves to do moves that puts him into right stance so he could go for backlash, which is the armored launch kick that everybody seems to detest. Yo, Acid Light, what's going on, man? Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate it. Joined just in time. But yeah, so everybody detests that move. So the opponent might have a niche or strategy or little flow chart or whatever where they'll do a sequence of moves that puts him into right stance to get that move off, or maybe even just raw do it in the neutral. So it's up to you to be aware and pay attention to how often you're seeing this being done. Once you aware of that and you get that down to a T, after that, then it's just executing and countering it. Like, okay, I understand how backlash works. And then of course, we know armor moves lose to lows and throws. So maybe I want to put myself at a range to where I can duck, because punishing it has a pretty decent recovery. Meaning if you're going to duck and stand up and punish it, you gotta be on it. Like, you gotta have it ready. You have to have your punish ready. But with situations like that, I like to look for consistency. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's important to practice the most optimal thing that you can do and try to make it feel like second nature. But always have a myriad of things that you can do, because it may be those times, like I said, we're not robots. We're not going to do the absolute best thing every time. The key is to try to be consistent with doing the best thing every time, but we're not going to do it every single time, if that makes sense. It's because it's hard, things like, and then you have to incorporate things like pressure, just being in unfamiliar territory, all that. You have to incorporate all of that, and that's why you're not gonna always, do that. Like, I've seen some of the highest level players, like, the Koreans and stuff like that, and they'll punish things sometimes with just jab or something like that. You be like, dang, that, watching it, what the max punish is, but also you're not feeling the pressure or whatever is going through their mind during the match. That's why if you ever notice, when you sit down and you analyze your match footage, you see things a lot clearer, because you're not in the heat of the moment. You're not feeling that fire. You're not feeling the burn at all. So it's like, man, you got time to sit down and analyze and think. While it is important to go back to old footage and analyze, because then you'll be able to practice better. With practicing better, that means, your strategy, your punishment, and all that will collectively get better, because you sat down and you went over and you looked over that. So that's why awareness is important during match, because now that you've done all this and then you're seeing it during the match, you can respond to it better. Like I said, reaction to an action. And people tend, like I said earlier in the broadcast, for anybody that's just now joining, I mentioned people lose simply because of not paying attention. When you don't pay attention, you know, it could be costly. Like I said, it could be expensive. So you falling victim to this flow chart where somebody is, you know, maybe putting you using a plus frame button and then grabbing. And, you know, you keep falling victim, you missing your throw breaks because they may be playing a character that may have, you know, regular grabs and command grabs. And this isn't just Tekken, you know, like I said, you could attribute this to Street Fighter too. Like, there are certain characters in Street Fighter that has command grab options, and you know, it's all strategy, it's all tendencies, and these are things that are important to pay attention to, because it's going to make or break the match. And if you're going to be mad at yourself if you lose and you go back and you watch and then you just sit there, you're like, oh my god. Because that's what I call the salt mine moment. Because when, man, the salt be real sometimes when you lose to something that, you know, like, oh man, if I would have, you know, paid better attention, I would have, you know, I would have won. And then that's when the salt really builds. And you go back and you got to take that 5 minutes, you know, maybe punting, maybe do a little bit of air punching, a little bit of yelling, whatever way you know, release that steam. And then if you get a chance, whether it was you being put in losers or you being knocked out of, say, a tournament or whatever, you got that second to breathe and then come back to it. Trust me, as a player who's been playing for so long now, competitively, I could tell you every player has that time or that moment or something they may have fell victim to. Hell, I just had that last night. So when I tell you it's a very real thing and that it's not exclusive to just you, most players think, oh, it's because of where I'm at my skill level currently, and that I'm, you know, I'm not good enough, I'm not this, I'm not that. And they start thinking, oh man, I need to, even though improvement is, you know, still a thing that should be focused on, you can't solely just place that on your shoulders and act like that's just exclusive to you, because it's not. Strategies and tendencies are a very real thing on both ends. Like, you got to have yours ready, and obviously your opponent is going to have theirs ready, and y'all have to be. That's what makes fighting games so deep. Meaning, especially when you crack ceilings and reach different levels. What you're watching and what you're seeing, the Yomi, all of that, it's vast. And you're pitting your strategy against your opponents, and then you have to counter that, and then they try to counter what you use to counter, and then you have to, like, it's a pendulum. If I had to say something that could describe fighting, a pendulum. Now, what do pendulums do? You know, they start off in neutral and zero, you know, not moving at all, and then when it starts to swing, you know, it goes from one side to the other. And that literally can be an entire match. You could literally just see it swinging from one side to the other. And the key is to have it on your side the most. Meaning, if you possibly can hold it on your side, you know, that's really what you wanted. You wanted to stay on your side. A pendulum, yeah, a pendulum. Like momentum and all that, morale, all of this coincides and ties into this. So it's important to get the advantage. And it's funny that I'm saying this now, but that just lets you know how universal concepts are when it comes to fighting games. Because the next episode we're gonna kind of dive deep in, but we'll get to that when we get there. But it was just funny, but that shows you how closely knit these concepts are, and that's why it's important to understand all of them. That's the reason why I started this podcast, to help players understand these things better, which will ultimately help and mold them to become better players. So, but strategy and tendencies are things you have to be aware of. You have to watch and see, like in Street Fighter, if you playing against somebody that's using a fireball character, pay attention to the range where they go to throw their fireballs, or how often they're throwing them. And respond accordingly. Maybe you're going to walk them down and take their space away from them, or you're going to start jumping over them and get a jump in punish, stuff like that. Or in a 3D game, you know, knowing ranges is universal in all fighting games, but in 3D games, since movement has an extra plane and movement is kind of a bigger factor, I want to say it's a slightly bigger factor in 3D games, because most 3D games usually, you know, not projectile heavy, since that third plane of movement exists and you can simply just step out of the way when it's coming at you, or especially if thrown from a long distance, you can definitely step out the way. But in 3D games, you can simply, you know, how well you control the space. If say a person is sticking out this button from here, okay, it's linear, I can step it, punish, or put myself at this range to where it'll whiff, and then I can whiff punish or block punish, whatever I decide to do, however I decide to go. So your awareness needs to be high on strategy and tendencies, and that's a must, because it's all these things are make or break situations, all of them. And then of course, last but not least, and I think people really don't pay attention to this one, because again, your mind is so intent on hitting the buttons and, you know, just brawling. Because I'm telling you, if I were to do that poll, especially to the common player, we all know the common person, the casual as we like to call them, they just want to turn the game on, hit buttons, and have fun, which is not wrong. What I don't like is when the elitist players try to say they're wrong for that. No, the goal of gaming in general is to have fun, and if you're having fun, there's no issues with that. But if you want to become a more serious player, a competitive player, then there are concepts you need to understand, obviously. But this one here is really neglected, and that's environment. You like environment? Environment how? What environment? Well, yeah, the level itself. You know, some games even have, well, it's more so exclusive to NRS, but the levels may have special obstacles and things that you can use. such as weapons, interactables, and things like that, and you have to pay attention to that. You do. But it's still a general concept though, because you have to pay attention to where you're at on the level. You know, if there's walls, or if you're just trying to control space, all of that. That's important. People neglect that though. People don't really take into account the environment to that extent. Because like I said, most people just want to turn on the game, hit buttons, and go from there. The environment, however, is just as big of a part as, like, I want to say even the life bar and the time, because those things kind of coincide. Because especially if you're on a stage that has like walls and you can take damage from getting smacked against the wall, you know, your opponent may come up with a strategy or is looking to wall splash you and get that extra bit of damage from being peeled up against the wall. And most people don't take that into account or see that as a real viable strategy, when it is. And it's, you know, with time, you can either, as far as time goes, and then if you have, like, especially in Tekken, with the infinite stages, you know, you may fight a person that has a character with a great backdash, or that player can backdash really well, and they may just want to run and scam the time down away from you. So as the opponent, as you fighting against that, you have to be prepared and ready to deal with that. That is something you have to fight against. That is not something you can just neglect if you want to see the result that you want to see, and that's to win. If you want to win, that's something you have to know how to deal with. If you can't deal with that, then all I'm gonna tell you is good luck. It's as simple as that. Environment is just as important, because it's a weapon. You can use it to gain advantage. You know, any tool that, you know, in fight games, any tool that you use to garner yourself an advantage is a weapon. It's a weapon, and it can be used either offensively or defensively. That's what makes fighting games beautiful, because the strategies can get, you know, from minuscule to very complex, and your mind, you know, has to be prepared to deal with that. And if you're ever aspiring to be competitive in fighting games, you have to, in my wholehearted opinion, you have to have the mental capacity, the mental fortitude, like all of that. You have to be able to deal with the mental part, because that's actually just as big, if not slightly more important than, you know, the physical part of it, which is, you know, picking up the pad, plugging it in, and executing. It all starts from the mind first, you know, before even as us as functioning human beings. Before we execute something, we usually think it in our mind, aka plan. We plan something, and then we draw it up in our head, and then we lay it out and execute it. That's how fighting games work. You need the mental. You have to be able to draw up these strategies and tendencies. You have to have the mental to be able to deal with them when you're going against them. You have to be able to, you know, manage your time, manage your life bar. All that starts from the mental. So if you don't have the mental capacity to do that, I'm not gonna say you can't play fighting games. I'm not gonna say that to you at all. But I will say that the competitive side, the, you know, the tougher, the more advanced, the higher levels of it, that shouldn't be something I would recommend aspiring to unless you commit yourself to building yourself to reach that level. Because that's why I said some people will wholeheartedly admit, this is not me, this is not my niche, this isn't for me. I'm not, people admit that, and that's cool. But if you are aspiring to reach like the episode I had, the old episode, I think it was episode 2, Evolution of a Player. If you are willing or aspiring to reach a new or higher level, then that is important to get a hold of. Got to. The mental is important. So that's why, because when your mental is there, then you'll be able to use something like your environment to help combat against your opponent. That's not a commoner strategy. Like I said, a casual won't even think of necessarily using their environment right off the bat. Like, they may know it's there, but they're not going to immediately know, like, well, if I do this, I could do this. Casuals don't really think like that for real. Yo, what's up, Hi? What's going on, Brody? What is happening? I'm shocked. You usually starting up your Saturday sessions, or are you not doing that today? But all in all, glad you in here though. Oh, 30 minutes. Okay, so I wasn't off. I wasn't off. That's in 30 minutes. Yeah, but thanks for tuning in though. But yeah, as I was saying, casuals don't really think to use environment. That's layers. That's what we call layers. When the layers start to peel back, the more you advance. So casuals don't typically look to advance. So these things I'm even mentioning here may not necessarily be in their mind. They're not aware, or they're not really thinking about it. Like, yeah, the most they may think about is, oh, if I, get their life to 0, I win, which is correct thinking, but the way you do it, that's when the layers come in. It's how you do it. Like how am I, yo, Kennard, no, you're not really late. And like I said, these episodes do get archived, so whatever you want to run it back to and watch, you can. And then they're going to be up on my YouTube after it's over with. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this is a double header. This is episode 9, and episode 10 is coming right after this. So, be prepared for that. Because I'm doing a double header, it may just be roughly an hour apiece. So this episode is nearing the end. But again, you'll be able to run it back. But yes, environment. Like I said, environments can have interactables, like I said, walls, certain angles you could use to get, maybe specific combos, just a lot. All of that is a factor. And those are all the key things to be aware of to help build up awareness during fighting games. All of those are legit factors, legit things, everything that you need to take into consideration when playing. If you want to join a competitive circle of fighting games, you definitely need that. Is it TZZ Dean? Thanks for the follow, definitely appreciate it. But yeah, if you want to grow competitively, then or begin to even enter competitively. So how do you win Evo? Well, it's not a thing this year, so I guess everybody wins. So No, but I don't have the answer to that question. There's no specific answer to that question. If it's your time, it's your time. I mean, because everybody trains hard for that, and whoever was the man or woman that day, you know, it is what it is as far as that. But I hope that everything that was gone over in this episode helped you understand awareness that much more. It's definitely important to be aware. Awareness is a trait that you need to hone and get together if you do want to see, you know, some type of W, some type of victory, some type of advancement, all that good stuff. And that's pretty much gonna wrap up awareness this episode. Like I said, it will be highlighted and archived, and I will be throwing it up on my YouTube, which is L Train's Fighting Dojo. So if you want to watch it on YouTube, it will be there. But I am going to take a quick breather or whatnot, and then, you know, get everything together for the next episode. So y'all sit tight. I will literally be back momentarily. 1 second. Oh, wait.
Here we go. We in business now.
Alright, y'all. I am going to reboot and refresh OBS just to make sure, you know, everything goes through. This won't take long, so I will definitely be right back. I just had to make sure all my slides are you know, together in the way I want them to, and then we'll get that episode going. So I will literally be right back. I just had to check and make sure all of those fully downloaded and came through. So I'll literally be right back, guys. Let me reboot and refresh.